thank you all so much for being here. We're so excited. That film was the perfect intro. Arne also gave a great intro earlier, and so I think we can really just dive right in here. My name is Chloe Sorvino. I'm a journalist at Forbes. My book is, you may have seen it over there, and we're going to do a signing also a little bit after this. But let's hop in. Can you share a little bit about how you come to this work and why you think farmed seafood has a key role to play in the future of food?
So I always talk about the reason I got into kelp, and thank you all for sitting for that video. I actually didn't realize it was showing today, so that gave me such a thrill. So I got to seaweed through the idea of economic development and prevented economic development. My background is in economic development. I was a diplomat for a number of years, and when I came back to Maine, I saw this industry of people that is thriving on the water, and that's not true for most coastal areas in the United States anymore. But in Maine, we have this thriving, robust lobster industry, and it's all generational, and it's all owned by the people who are fishing it rather than kind of big fleets.
So rare these days.
It's so rare, and they preserve their industry so much that lobster population has really expanded over the last 20 years, not contracted. But the Gulf of Maine is also warming faster than 99% of oceans in the world. So we're the harbinger for what's going to happen throughout the oceans everywhere. And 2 more degrees in the water, and that lobster industry is going to completely disappear, despite all the conservation efforts that we've put into it. So
staggering. I mean, let's all take that in right now.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's a $2 billion industry in one of the poorest states in the country, and it's going to be gone. And we can do nothing about it. But what we can do is start adapting and finding ways to make sure that we remain who we've always been in the state of Maine, which is people who work on the ocean. So we started looking at aquaculture as a way to help people maintain who they've always been and maintain their heritage. Not something that's new, but in fact a way to be who they've always been. So whether it be oysters, mussels, or seaweed, and at the time, seaweed seemed like a great industry for fishermen to go into. Same equipment, off-season, winter, complementary to what they're already doing.
Profitable.
Same skill set. And there was not a single buyer of seaweed in the United States. There was no processor. There was no one to make seeds, none of it. The entire country processed around 30,000 pounds of line-grown seaweed in 2018. Wow. This year, by working with fishermen, Atlantic Sea Farms has harvested we will be harvesting about 1.5 million pounds with 27 fishermen as a way to adapt to climate change.
Wow. And 27 fishermen who are being able to remain independent and just work
totally
with you. Have you built the market?
Yep, and we kind of work together as an aggregator to help them do that. We give them free seeds. We guarantee purchase of everything they grow. We process everything in our 27,000 square foot facility, self-manufacture into retail products that are available across the country, but also ingredients for other CPG products, so nutraceuticals, crackers, those kind of things that other people make.
Yeah, for everyone who was at Expo West a few days ago, they were out selling their wares with the rest of them, and I'm sure had a great show because seaweed was all over the place.
It sure was. Most of it was ours in other people's stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure. Cool. You want to go, Dan?
Yeah, so I can relate a lot with these stories because 17 years ago, I arrived to these coastal communities in Oaxaca and Chiapas after a hurricane, and this is exactly the same stories that I would hear then. Now, like my grandparent would go to twice a week, and they would get enough for feeding their family. My dad went out every day. I need to go 3 times a day, and sometimes I don't even get for my gasoline. No, these were the kind of stories that we were listening to. And then I looked at aquaculture. I come from Mexico, so in the northwest part of Mexico, there's an important industry for shrimp farming.
It's been around for a while.
Yeah, so we tried to take this aquaculture to the south, but then we realized the huge environmental cost of that. So we decided 12 years ago to switch from NGO to startup, and our idea was to basically master the technology that will power this industry forward in the next decades. So, and we focus on shrimp because it's the food conversion ratio is great, so we get on a 1-to-1 basis, and shrimp are I was listening to the conversation about insects, so shrimp is an arthropod, so it's basically a tasty insect. So we have the same advantages that you would have on insects you have on shrimp. And actually, I was talking to somebody yesterday about insect meal and insect oil that can actually help us deal with the sustainability aspect of feed.
Fascinating. Okay, we're going to get into a lot more about that soon because the way you grow is fascinating. But Chef Andrew, I'd love to hear a bit more about why you think farm seafood has a key role to play in this climate change future we're all in?
I think that the future of saving our planet lies in our water systems. Too many people around the world, in the billions with a B, rely on it for their sole source or main source of protein. And almost a billion people around the world actually work in the industry. So we can't ignore our oceans. Our oceans are unexplored. We know very little about it. What we do understand primarily is what exists off our coasts. So if there are ways to move a product like shrimp, because I come at this as an activist and a storyteller. So if we move a product like shrimp off of our coastal systems where there are some, because there are some great shrimp farmers on the coast, and there are some not very great shrimp farmers on the coast. And so if we can move shrimp farming inland, if we can put it anywhere, essentially, and we know how fast they grow to market, and we can do it cleanly to scale and remove a lot of the cost barriers to buying it by farming it, we should be investing in that. Why are we putting billions of dollars with a B towards cell-based fish companies, which will take another 40 years to solve their energy problem and get the product cheap enough to solve our problem that we need to solve by 2030, when the solution is sitting in this chair and this chair and all the other chairs already? As a, I've been a chef, and I've been in kitchens since I was 14 years old. My parents were activists. I've been aware of these issues for a long time, culturally, economically, and most importantly, how it's reflected on the plate, right? And since the 70s, when I started just learning about this stuff, slowly at first, but then, of course, very aggressively over the last 20 years, I have come to realize what one of my colleagues, Jen Bushman, who's a co-founder of fedbyblue.org, you should go check it out. We're screening our documentary, Hope in the Water, tomorrow evening. Come see us. Calls protection and production, right? So we can protect our oceans by sequestering carbon in that seaweed, so it's good for our environment. Columnar farming, along with those mussels and oysters and clams that you were talking about, that filters out our water. We can take operations for shrimp and other types of ocean-going food, just salt water, for example, and move it out to sea. Some stuff grows in freshwater or in a saline environment or estuarial environment, and we can take that into our river system, and we can take it on land. We already have the solution. Why aren't we investing in it? We are running out of time. We used to think it was 2050. It's actually 2030, and I just came from my panel. I'm global ambassador for the United Nations World Food Program. 6 months ago, we titled our panel 2 Degrees to Disaster. I learned today we've lost 1.2 degrees. So we're now 0.8 degrees to disaster. So if you think we have till 2050 to solve this problem, you are absolutely 1,000% fucking wrong. We need to solve this problem tomorrow, and the solutions for it exist today right here. So why aren't we taking advantage of that? It seems ludicrous to me. It gets me
Absolutely, no, and thank you so much for all of that. And really, the underscoring point here is that we don't have enough time to waste on the wrong solutions, and stuff needs to be worked. The kinks need to be worked out now before we get to 2030. I mean, it has to happen now.
Invest in all the future, thinking that you want to do. But let's invest more in the solutions that exist today as represented by these two incredible people, right? I mean...
So Andrew teed you both up perfectly. Let's get into... You both are raising right now too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that Andrew said that's really important is that we so often, and I said this yesterday on a panel here, that we so often look to solutions of a man-made problem, climate change, through robotics and technology. We need to be leaning into the strength of the people that are working on the water, who are working on the farms, who are creating your food. These are people who want a better environment, maybe more than anyone. They're the people who rely on it every day. They're not the ones who broke the system. And I think we can look to people to solve the crisis. Yeah. And so often we're looking for these kind of magic, okay, let's draw carbon out of the air with these vacuums and then throw it out into space, or let's take seaweed and sink it to the bottom of the ocean. This is all crazy talk. What we can do is look at thousands of fishermen on the coast. How can they be growing oysters, which take carbon up? I mean, that shell is made from exactly what's making our ocean more acidic. Mussels, seaweed. How can we get them into shrimp farming? We have this incredible resource in the United States and everywhere, but in the United States we have this incredible resource of people. And so often we forget that those are the solutions to making a better future.
I love that. Love that. Love that.
Yeah, so I think that, so when I started this was 17 years ago, you wouldn't hear about food tech and ag tech. So watching the space develop over the years has been very interesting. And I think that it's very natural, because if we think about technology, then we need to think about the whole industries that we are trying to disrupt. And these are very obscure industries. It's very hard. It takes years to start understanding what are the dynamics in terms of the production, and to figure out that fishing, it's really an extractive, it's like mining, right? So we are not depending on running and chasing buffaloes over the steppes. So why are we relying on catching tuna to get our ceviche? But in the end, you can. So we have been So you didn't start yesterday, no? So it's been quite a journey, and I think that right now this approach about technology sometimes is high tech. It can be also low tech to solve something, because we are relying on the biology of aquatic organisms. So in the case of shrimp, a shrimp lays 150,000 eggs every 6 weeks, and it grows 10,000 times. So a shrimp grows 10,000 times its size in 4 months. So you have your tech growth, right? You have your exponential growth.
So there's no wild cows? This is the argument that I have with people all the time. Why is it okay, even in a bespoke butcher shop, right, with mustachioed tattooed butchers? I'm not making a knock. Don't at me, the mustachioed tattooed butchers guild. But nobody walks in there and says, "Show me your wild caught," right? I mean, there's just farmed and better farmed. With chickens, there are no wild. Well, I shouldn't say there aren't wild chickens. I've eaten them in an old job of mine. But no one ever walks in and says, "Show me the wild ones." There's just farmed and then much better farmed, right? And yet people denigrate and literally crap all over an industry that, yes, are there some aquaculture companies that are not doing it the right way? Sure, there's bad aquaculture, but the majority of it is good and getting better because they see the financial upside and the global responsibility they have to produce a cleaner, better, healthier, cheaper product for everybody. And I think the other thing that I would like to add is this notion about extraction, right? Aquaculture is an additive resource, right? I mean, I just can't stress that again. We're not applying more pressure. We're not applying more pressure. It's why when it comes to farming, I love vertical, right? And where, I mean, that's a tech thing. And I guess I did know.
Everything has a trade-off.
Last thing that I would want to point out is that we can learn from our past. Sequencing is important. The tech comes after the analog. Don't put the tech first, right? If we look back at analog, people have been farming fish for tens of thousands of years, okay? This is not new technology, all right? So let's start taking that farming premise that's analog and then move it forward and use tech to help increase the availability of it and the viability of it for feeding a hungry planet. That's the sequential system for it.
I agree, and I will say, billions of pounds of seaweed are produced in East Asia. Mm-hmm. You know how they harvest it? On a small boat with a knife into a bag. If you go to Europe right now, where I spent some time in the last few weeks, the European Union is putting millions into new technologies of how to harvest. This has been 7 years. They produced 20,000 pounds of kelp last year because they're still investing in
And zero
those
jobs.
solutions. 0 jobs, and they're all, over-engineering it. In the meantime, our partner farmers are slinging it up, taking a knife, and cutting it off into a bag.
Nice.
And they can do 20,000 pounds in a day. And so what's better than that knife, actually, is a bigger knife.
Right.
It's not actually an automatic. So, I mean, I do think, yes, and we just, we tend to just look at technology as if it's the answer, when in fact it can support.
It's not, in your industry in particular, almost irrelevant in a way, because and I really want to put a line underneath it. Those lobstermen and women that you saw, they are using, as Briana said, the exact same equipment to grow seaweed that they are to take lobster out of the ocean. So it's and it flip-flop season. So it's extremely value-add, hands-on, spend time together, brilliant video. Where tech can help is as you move from growing seaweed into other places where we do need to get feed down, and we do need to address a lot of those other issues about getting things to market faster and to scale. Seaweed does not require more tech. And I would encourage people to always think about this as an economic development issue. As you pointed out, there are human beings, as I said at the beginning, working on the water. We need to preserve those jobs. That's why bullshit documentaries like Seaspiracy, you can quote me on that, which is technically unsupported and factually incorrect, is not a reasonable premise. Leaving the ocean alone is not a reasonable premise. It is an unreasonable premise. It cannot happen. It cannot be regulated, and it won't get us there fast enough. Full stop. As Jacques Cousteau said, the future of saving our planet and human beings is by working in and with the ocean, not away from it.
Yeah, so I think that aquaculture and this new kind of producing protein can become also a staple or a template for a new food system. Because I think that if we consider the problems and as consumers, we are taking this product, and the more that we know about it, the worse we feel, right? So, and we can turn this around. And I think that it's also about the tools that we use. So what I mean, so basically the past food system has only optimized for efficiency. We need a new food system that optimizes for efficiency, but also for environmental impact, maybe for nutrition, right? And then what tools are we using? Yeah, it would help. So what tools are we using? The past food system was built basically on industrial tools. By this I mean engineering and chemistry. But chemistry is really a very let's say, low-resolution way of solving something that biology can solve at a much better efficiency. So what do I mean? In nature, there's basically, where there's shrimp, on average, there's 4 shrimp per square meter. So in order to catch the amount of shrimp that we get from the ocean, we need to scrape 2 million square kilometers of the bottom of the ocean every year. Right? So what, for instance, in the case of our company, shrimp farming is usually done in the tropics. Shrimp like it very, very warm, right? So we need to, if we wanted to do it here or in Indianapolis as we're doing it, we need to have a controlled environment. So for that, we need tech. But we don't need like very crazy tech. We basically need insulation tech. Insulating the containers. So that's a low-tech approach to solve basically the most important problem.
My friend, can you just repeat slowly for everyone to let it soak in where you're raising your shrimp?
Indianapolis.
Can you explain your model fully?
Yes.
Very fascinating.
Yes. So
and we really didn't even discuss it, how you're pretty much the only person who's able to do a no antibiotic farm shrimp, which is completely unheard of. So let's get into that.
Thank you. So yes, so we've been working on a technology to basically not need water exchange in shrimp farming. Water exchange sits at the bottom, and it's the root of both the financial problems in shrimp farming. Shrimp live in a never-ending pandemic. So as a farmer, you're dealing with the fact that maybe this season is the season that you will lose 70% of your production. It's not easy. So, and then it's also the source of the destruction of the environment. Shrimp farming is responsible for 50% of the destruction of mangrove forests in the world. And mangrove forest captures as 5 times as much as any rainforest in the world carbon, right? So, and also a typical shrimp farm pollutes the ocean at a comparable amount of a 500,000 people city.
Wow.
So, water exchange. Why do we need water exchange? Because you're adding protein, you're adding feed into the system, that is nitrogen. And then the shrimp or fish, they metabolize the nitrogen through their gills. This nitrogen in the form of ammonia starts to build up, and it becomes toxic at a 1 milligram per liter. So this is why people use water exchange. Like I was using that strategy. I used that strategy when I was 9-year-old, and I need to clean my fish tank, right? So a 2,000 acres shrimp farm in Ecuador is doing exactly the same strategy that I was using at 9 years old. So what is the alternative? If you've been ever in an aquarium, you see a very nice, pretty environment with very clear water. What is needed in order to get that? Basically, you have a series of filtration. You have a sand filter, and you have a UV filter, a biological filter, and this is high tech. So it's very expensive. You need somebody there to watch it all the time, and if something breaks, then you lose everything, and it takes weeks to recover that stability. So what nature does? Nature doesn't have filters. Nature doesn't have a non-nature deposit of water that you can use to dilute your nitrogen. Nature needs to keep everything in balance. So it has evolved microbial communities that turn this ammonia, which is trapped energy, into their own cells. So we have that. So we basically miniaturized these, and we've been working on this technology for 12 years. And this was completely a contrarian view from the whole industry. The whole industry has, aquaculture, at least shrimp farming, has bet its future on recirculating aquaculture system, which is a very high-tech approach. So what we do, we turn every unit into an ecosystem, leveraging these microbial communities. These microbial communities also become part of the feeding of the shrimp, creating a higher content of collagen, of fatty acids, and then we put it into a miniaturized shipping containers. This is hypermodular farms, because also recirculating aquaculture systems, farms are very complex engineered endeavors. It takes 3 to 4 years. So what do? We manufacture these containers in Mexico City, and we send it ready to use. So in 2 days, we can put these units ready to work. So right now, we have one, we call it Shrimp Box. It's at the Boston Seafood Show, and in 2 days, we turned the Boston Seafood Show exhibition into a shrimp farm. So then, and the reason we decided to do it in Indianapolis, because I think that people would believe us that if we can grow shrimp in landlocked Indianapolis, then we can grow shrimp anywhere in the world. Yeah. This is why we decided to go first.
But I just want to underscore another value add to the choice of Indianapolis. We have to change people's behavior. We were joking, full transparency, we're friends, we've just met. And when the seaweed was coming out of the water, we kind of looked at each other and made a joke and went, ooh, gross, right? Because that's our funny way of mocking people who think seaweed is gross because we don't, right? However, there are a lot of people who do, and they don't understand it. And there are a lot of people who don't understand a shrimp that grows in Indianapolis, and they automatically go to, well, I'll take the Mexican brown or those Ecuadorian whites or those Florida pinks, right? And they don't understand the difference and the choices that they're making. So once they do understand it, because everyone in this room, I guarantee you, we're all on the same page. We know there's a climate crisis. We know there's a horrific challenge to our food system, and I could just go down a list of general topics. We may disagree about some of the details, but we generally all agree on the facts around this. So if we're going to change the way our world looks in order to save ourselves a truly existential issue, we have to change human behavior. And if we're going to change human behavior, we have to establish trustworthiness, right? You have to believe what these people are telling you. And so I love the choice that you made of Indianapolis. Because if you said you were in Hawaii or Florida or, south of San Diego, I don't think it's actually as awesome and believable as saying, if we can do it in Indianapolis, we can do it anywhere, right? And we just told a story in Hope in the Water of a shrimp farmer, I'm sure you know them, in central Minnesota. I mean, central Minnesota. I mean, this is crazy, right? But these are places that, guess what, also need jobs. Also need jobs. So it's that trustworthiness is going to drive the behavior change, and we need that component if we're going to tackle these existential problems.
And what I love about both of these businesses is that they're still enabling independent farmers. Can you speak to that a bit more, and how you've seen that story have that multiplier effect?
Yeah, so it's sort of crazy to look at this industry that's been around for 200 plus years and say, hey, do you guys want to farm seaweed? And it's not like that just came easy. And I think it's so interesting when people are like, oh yeah, you just get these fishermen. Like, no, it's not, it doesn't work like that. I've been working in the fishing industry in Maine for about 8 years now through economic development initiatives. And so I had some trust, and I definitely leaned into that trust that first year when I said, hey guys, I promise I'm going to show up on the dock. Let me just give you this thing of spool that looks like mold, and you're going to put it out in a farm that you paid for, that you put out lines for, and I promise it's going to have seaweed on it, and I'm going to show up on the other end. And for some reason, 3 people were like, okay, let's give it a try, including Keith Miller, who you saw in that video, who he calls himself an old-timer, which was part of it, right? Get an old-timer, get a young guy, get a guy with kids. And guys that are respected in the industry. It's 4,000 plus lobster license holders, but we all know each other. They're all on those radios all the time because there's nothing else to do out there. And so the first year, April, I don't know, any of you have been in Maine in April, it's still winter, and it's cold, and nobody's fishing. And so I'm picking up bags of kelp, and there's these 1,000-pound bags of kelp. And that's a big bag, like a big salt bag, as you guys saw in that video. And we write the check on the spot for that first year to instill trust. And we give it to Keith Miller. And all these guys are standing at the end of the dock like, what the hell's going on over there? And he holds up the check and goes, look here, boys, this is the future. And I tell that story all the time because those first few years, these guys really just took a flyer on us that we were going to do it. Fast forward to COVID, when we were entirely in food service, it falls out right before harvest season, and we still show up. And we wrote an email to everyone, those that use emails, texted everyone else, said, we'll still be there when we have no idea where the seaweed's going to go. No idea. But we'll still be there. And those radios went off, and now we have a line of people waiting. We're in the queue with our Department of Marine Resources to get the leases. It's very likely, but by the end of next year, we'll also be working in Alaska. We just started working in Rhode Island. We're going to have 37 farmers by the end of next season if those leases get passed. And now it's like kelp. People are looking at kelp like, oh, these guys make money.
Wow,
and this is why we're going to do it, and they know we show up.
Really powerful.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I worship at her church, so it's the other stories that you love to tell are very simply come down to as lobsters continue kind of march north in search of colder water, it's going to be more and more important to save those jobs with alternative resources like the seaweed. And I spoke, we were at several events together, and I've spoken to people who are also worshiping at her church, and they pulled me aside and said, yeah, year 1, X, year 2, 3X, year 3, I'm going to be 9X, and that's going to be more money than I made in the lobster season, and more money that I'm forecasted to make in lobster seasons to come, right? Because as the supply dwindles, the cost is going to go up. We went through a period of a decade plus with lobster prices kind of at a low, and that's why lobster rolls got served everywhere, because all of a sudden it was affordable. Even though they're still expensive, it was somewhat affordable. The prices are going to start to go up again. This is the future. And I will also add, when we are talking about extracting something and it's used in so many different things, I mean, nutraceuticals, you can pickle it, you can do all these wonderful, cosmetics, moisturizers, all these value-add ways in which you can utilize vegetables from the ocean. The thing that I think about as a chef is eating them. And delicious, nutritious ways to do a quick stir fry with seaweed that you've dried a little bit so it doesn't dump a lot of water in your wok, and teaming it with, you know, something spicy and shrimp. Like, I'm already thinking, like, yeah, this is a good meal right here. This is a healthy, nutritious meal right here that can be super affordable, support jobs, and a new way of thinking about food.
And they're actually serving that meal in a second. I think it might be there with our kelp. And
Are they really?
They are.
Oh my gosh!
And you didn't know.
And they can taste it.
And everybody can taste it. But also, what we do at Atlantic Sea Farms is take all of that and turn it into things that people know how to use. Because, you know, Chef Andrew here can turn it into these amazing dishes that are, you know, and he has, that are very creative and outstanding. Most people, when they look at kelp, have no idea how to use it. So one thing that we started doing is fermenting seaweed salad, fermenting a seaweed-based kimchi. We have sea veggie burgers that just launched in Sprouts and Wegmans, and things that you can just buy off the shelf and cook when you have no idea what to do with it. We have kelp cubes that go into your smoothies for thyroid
kimchi
function.
is particularly tasty.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I love that you guys are doing that. I mean, I read the Bren Smith book a bunch of years ago, tried to get the kelp spaghetti. Really, I love pasta. I was super into it, and it is
hard.
It's hard.
You
it's
need
hard.
something that's easy that you
yeah.
can just put a fork in and eat. That's where we are in American cuisine right now.
Yeah. One thing on what you said earlier, I thought you can't farm in Alaska.
Oh, no, you absolutely can farm oysters, mussels, and seaweed. And in fact, not fish. But Alaska is actually dumping $50 million into the development of their mariculture industry.
Fascinating. Wow.
It's going to change in Alaska. There's a lot of laws moving through state houses really quickly. And, you know, Alaska has, like a few other states in our country, have very specialized codicils in their state constitutions about it, because they were trying to preserve a cultural hegemony. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. From 50, 60 years ago, right? That's not applicable today. So I truly believe it's going to change, because all those people are looking at Maine and going, wait a second, our dollars are dry. We should be looking at alternatives.
Let's stay on that for a little bit. I mean, what's one policy that you'd love to see enacted? Or in other ways, like, what's one regulation you'd like to see slashed that actually like really impact quickly your business in some way?
So in our case, I think that we are creating a new industry here in the United States, which is shrimp farming. There's nothing. So we need a little bit of help. Our system basically complies with all federal regulations because we don't touch federal waters. We don't discharge water, so we don't have a problem in terms of that regulation. But we need basically help in terms of making it more competitive, because the problem is that certifications, their business is in Ecuador and in India. They will never give us like the highest standard of certification. So we need the government to step in and as it has USDA organic, USDA prime or choice or whatever. We need something like that can tell the customer this is something that is not using antibiotics, it's not using chemicals, it's not using preservatives, it's not harming the environment, it's not polluting the ocean, right? So something like that, so that it's a credible signal from a third party that makes it more trustworthy.
For us, and for those of you who were here yesterday, you heard me say this. I feel like at this point, 30% of my time is focused on fighting the absolute gentrification of the coasts that is severely restricting our ability to farm the oceans. And it is simply, when you look at coasts, you don't see small homes. You see summer people, you see the wealthy, and the wealthy they believe the ocean should have a clear view for them from their house. And there are very few places in the United States where there's not a wealthy home looking at the ocean. And they single-handedly have killed aquaculture in the United States. The only place that is not true is Alaska, because no one lives there. And I think that what is so beguiling to me in Maine is we call it vacation land. People come up from Boston and New York for 2 weeks a year.
Yeah,
they own the entire coast, and they don't want to see a mussel raft. They don't want to see oyster bags. They're good with seaweed because they're not there. And because it's a winter crop. And I actually was hosted at a woman's house in the belly of the beast for a big conference up north in this kind of Mount Desert Island, Bar Harbor area, for any of those who have gone to Acadia National Park. She said, I'm just so glad you're here. I'm so excited about your industry. And I said, yeah, I appreciate you hosting me. You know, it's expensive to stay up here. You know, but you seem to be blocking the mussel farm going in. She said, oh, I just don't want to see it. I'm only up here for 2 weeks a year. And I don't think that can be undersold about how much of my time in aquaculture is to farm on the open ocean is actually just fought trying for rich people to not block us because of their viewscape. And it's a small policy, but it's one that should be absolutely railroaded through as soon as possible, because the litigious nature of those people and the way that they're able to get, you know, our local legislators in every coastal state to block aquaculture, particularly California, Washington, Oregon. It's happening in Maine. It's certainly happened in other places. But all the places where you see beautiful coastline, it's the rich who have blocked it.
Truth to power.
And this is a very difficult thing, because I know there's a lot of people out there who are saying, well, don't we get a choice about where to live, et cetera? And the answer is yes, we do. However, it's a yes and. Because I have been in countries, I have been in coastal communities around the world, in Europe, in Africa, in South America, where you see these incredible rafts that are supporting mussel and oyster farming. And there are people going to and fro and doing their work. And the people who have houses there actually rejoice in that, because the water is cleaner and it does not interfere. There is a beauty in it. It is not empty. It is literally, you know, this high and sits on the water. So I think there is a way that we need to understand what the word coexistence means in the face of an existential disaster that is going to happen if we don't. Because if we don't do what my friend just said, we are in even bigger danger, right? My dream is subsidies. I've done just a ton of work, and I know I'm preaching to the converted here, and I'm a huge fan, by the way, so it's great to be sitting here talking to you. But we explored a lot of this in my MSNBC series, What's Eating America. The farm-to-freighter economy, which is killing farming, it's killing our systems. We're spending $4 trillion a year on processed food-related diseases. Please don't use the word food-related diseases, okay? A tomato never gave anybody a disease, okay? A Big Mac has. On food-related diseases, we have these giant-sized issues, and we keep giving subsidies of all kinds to people who are not involved in growing what the U.S. government calls specialty crops. Specialty crops are all foods fit for human consumption, okay? They've been marginalized. Our food has been marginalized. So let's start subsidizing, okay, farmers who are doing this, all right? Subsidize that. And here's the big one. Let's subsidize women who are doing that. Sorry. Let's subsidize women of color who are doing that, okay? Because those are the people who have been most marginalized. So I'm not saying do anything else other than let's just put them at the front of the line when it comes to subsidies and access to capital. If we don't do that, because they need the jobs, that's going to save communities and our livelihoods faster than anything else, right? So let's straighten out that subsidy thing, and let's get immigration reform finally done and over with, so we have enough people to process everything that we're going to grow, pack, truck, plant, pick, and eventually eat in this country. Because if you talk to anyone who's in food production, including folks who are trying to do this, it's going to become a worker problem if we grow to scale what these guys are doing.
Is that what you'd say would be your top priority for a farm bill? I wanted to end on farm bill talk.
I just named like 9 of them.
Fair,
sorry.
So that what you'd say, right?
I'm a wordy guy, but yes, I think that's very. I think you know, I mean, I was at the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, and a lot of side groups, and I've been working really, really hard on this for a couple of years. And you do have to, it is a holistic environment. It looks like this. And if you move one thing on one side of the graph, something else has to give, okay? It is an equation. So we have to finally move enough pieces. It's like one of those puzzles on Survivor at the end where someone's going to win $1 million. We have to move it around so everybody wins. The late Senator Paul Wellstone from Minnesota said, we all win when we all win, and I think that's the operating philosophy for me.
And I think as far as the Farm Bill goes, it's very plain and simply, our current agriculture system makes farmers poorer, the environment worse, and people less healthy. There's not a single thing about that is okay, and not a single thing about that shouldn't change. And so I think we need to turn it all over.
Workers.
And it's bad for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think we need to just flip on its head everything that we see as our current food system.
Yeah, I wanted to end on that because we were talking about the urgency earlier. It's funding for the next 5 years, pretty much the most crucial 5 years. I think everyone in this audience is super engaged on climate. I think that's for that reason. I mean, it's going to be the funding for these make or break it years. Any final thoughts, or what else keeps you optimistic otherwise?
Well, I think that I've been pondering on two quotes. One is the problem with these times is that not even the future is what it used to be. And the second one is the future always comes too fast and in the wrong order. I think that by looking at this work and by this, how can we create a new food system, is a way that we can get into a better relationship with how we think about the future. Instead of looking at the Black Mirror version of it, we are talking basically about a way to try to be more in harmony with the environment, to help our brothers and sisters, farmers, and enable better jobs and also the consumer. Because what I like is that people, when they eat our shrimp, they want to know more, and the more they know, they like it better because they like the story and the origin and all that.
And I think it's all about hope, and that's what their documentary is really highlighting. It's called Hope on the Water, because I think we often look at the ocean as this place of the seaspiracy news, and this is a place where there is so much hope, and there is so much opportunity, and there's so many people doing amazing things to build a better ocean and a better planet. And I think that's something that we don't see in a lot of industries, but certainly on the ocean we do.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're a little over time, so I'll let us go. But their bites are already out. I already see people eating. Everyone go try these amazing aqua-based foods, ocean-based foods. Thank you, and I'll be also doing a signing over there for the next little bit, too. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.